Cuzo.
Today I got Terry Tucker from Denver, Colorado. He's coming here with an interesting story. I'm about to bring him up right now. Hi, Terry.
Hey, Cuzo, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, same. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so before we jump into, the interesting part of, the show, could you like give us a little bit about your background? I know you stated that you used to live here in Chicago, and what made you do the transition to Denver, Colorado?
Sure. So I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I am the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me, but I'm 6'8" tall, and actually played basketball at Marist High School in Chicago, and then got a scholarship to play basketball at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. I have another brother who's 6'7", who was a pitcher for the University of Notre Dame, and then another brother who was 6'6", who went to Lewis University in Joliet and was a Division II All-American 2 years in a row, and was actually drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the National Basketball Association. And then my dad was 6'5". So if you sat behind our family in church growing up, not a prayer's chance you were going to see anything that was going on there. When I graduated from the Citadel, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. Unfortunately, I ended up living with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's. Then I switched to hospital administration. And then I made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did during that experience was I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator. After my law enforcement career, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls' high school basketball when we lived in Texas. But for the last 11.5 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 30 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Oh, sweet. That's a lot. You got a lot of like jacks of all trades.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's been everywhere. So far as the SWAT, I took criminal justice myself. How was the experience just negotiating? I know that's like, we look at, movies and series, TV series. Is it something similar to that? Like far as, negotiation, or it's more like that's Hollywood, this how it is in real life?
Yeah, so back in the 1990s, Samuel L. Jackson did a movie called The Negotiator, and it made him look like Superman, like he did everything, and he did, and it was great. But it's absolutely not like that. I mean, he was amazing. We were not that good. We could never be as good as he was. And so it was like anything else. It was a team approach. There would be, yes, one person that was actually on the phone negotiating with the person, and then sitting right next to him or her would be another negotiator with headphones on, listening to everything that was going on. And then we'd have 3 or 4 more negotiators kind of working the crowd. Like, why are we here? What got us to this point? What caused this person, to barricade himself or to take a hostage? And so as a negotiator, as the primary, you might get a note from your secretary that said, don't talk about his mother. Because the people learned, our group in the crowd learned that he had a big fight with his mother and he barricaded himself with a gun. So you might get that note that says, don't talk about his mother. But I learned a lot about communication from being a negotiator. I remember when I first started, they gave us this formula, if I can remember it. It was 7, 38, 55. And that formula had to do with how we communicated with each other. 7% are the words that we use. 38% of it is the tone of voice that we use with those words. And then 55% of how we communicate with each other is our body language and our facial expressions. And so as negotiators, we didn't have that 55% because we weren't in the room with the person. I mean, obviously, if they've got a gun, we don't want to be in the room with them. So I couldn't see that if I said something to that individual, I couldn't see him, roll his eyes like, oh no, you're an idiot. I can't believe you said that to me. So we had to figure things out, certainly by what people were saying, but also what they weren't saying and how they were saying it. And you and I were talking before we started recording. You're married, I'm married. Really, a relationship, whether it's a negotiation, whether it's a parent child, whether it's a husband wife, whether it's a boss subordinate, is really dictated by trust.
Yeah.
Do I trust you?
Yeah.
And so we may spend hours over here talking about an issue, but the real reason we were here was over here, and the person didn't trust us enough to talk to us about that. So that's why sometimes negotiations took 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, because you had to develop that trust with that individual.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, building the rapport. When we was talking off, I guess you was trying to get a feel for me. I'm getting a feel from you at
Sure.
the same time. But it was more like, um, you feel me, I feel you out. It's a good fit. Let's go.
Yeah.
So, and my next question was, once you have I guess I would say perk, right? Or a suspect or
Mhm.
whoever on the phone that you negotiate with, like you said, like you really couldn't see his expression, his movement. So like, are y'all trained to like go off like the tone, like you said, the tone in their voice as well? Because you might come off as, your tone might be soft, and then they be like, oh, okay, I just, overthrow them, or I have full control over it. Like, do y'all have like some type of borderline, like, all right, this when I use this set of tone opposed to that, a lower tone, or mid-range tone.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we always tried to use what we called our curious voice, and tried to. We stayed away from why questions, and we
Okay.
did that because why questions sound accusatory.
Yeah.
Hey, Cuzo, why'd you do that? Wait a minute, is he suggesting I did something wrong? So I
Yeah.
can get to that same thing. Hey, Cuzo, what got us here?
Right.
Why did we do? So we would use what and how questions, and we would stay away from why questions. We would use our curious voice, unless the person got to a point where we knew they were lying to us. We would
Right.
use kind of our late night. We used to call it our late night DJ voice, and we did. That's kind of what we called it. And so you would get lower. Your tone would get lower. But the big thing that you did is you tried to mimic their emotion, and you
Okay.
would label it. And so if I knew that you were just ranting and raving about your mother, and I said, well, gee, Cuzzo, you sound a little upset, I totally missed it. No, you're
Yeah.
pissed at your
Yeah.
mother. You're furious at your mother. So you had to label the emotion, and then you kind of had to go there with the person. You had to kind of
Yeah.
get down, sort of in the weeds with them, which is why negotiating was so exhausting, because you're trying to mimic, you're trying to get on the level of the person so that they trust you. And we used one thing, I'll tell you, we used to use what was called tactical empathy. Help me to understand where you're coming from. Not necessarily agree. I mean, if I was negotiating with somebody that murdered 3 people, I wasn't going to say, oh, yeah, I totally get why you did that. But I wanted to understand from your perspective why that happened, what happened, and things like that, because that develops trust. And the other thing I'll say is the importance of listening, and not listening to respond, but listening to understand. Cuzzo, if you're talking and I'm like, all right, hurry up, Cuzzo, say what you're going to say because I want to get my 2 cents in. That's listening to respond. That's not listening to understand. Understand is, okay, Cuzzo, I hear what you're saying. I may agree with you. I may not agree with you, but help me understand where you're coming from. Again, in any relationship, that builds trust between the two people.
Yeah. It's almost like I'm going through that now. Like, in the professional field, it's more like he. one individual have their way, and then I have my way. But it's more as opposed to okay, you sit back and listen, and it's more like no, it's not gonna work. Like like how you say, he was just listening to respond,
Right.
opposed to trying to listen to understand. Because pretty much you already have your mind made up. Like I don't care what this guy is saying. This is gonna go this way. It's my way, or it's no way at all. And yeah, I completely understand that part. Um, I know touching on. I know you said you played D1 ball, right?
I
How
did.
was that like the transition? Because I know you jumped around. You went from you know D1 to to Wendy's to all over, and we're gonna get into that. But how was it when you played D1 ball? Because a lot of prospects, a lot of athletes thinking like it's easy, or they thinking like they already made it once they get accepted to the university, and then they really don't work as hard as they did once before they got the scholarship or got the offer. So things in that nature, like, could you touch bases on that?
Sure. So it was incredibly hard for me. I was very lucky, very fortunate to get a scholarship to play not just college basketball alone, but not to mention Division I basketball because I had 3 knee surgeries when I was in high school. So I was incredibly fortunate to play at the Citadel, located in South Carolina, but in the Southern Conference. And when I was in the conference, there were teams like Marshall and Furman, Western Carolina, and things like that. And I'll give you a kind of interesting story. So the last 2 years, my junior and senior year, they had the North-South doubleheader, which was they took 2 teams from North Carolina, which happened to be North Carolina and North Carolina State, and 2 teams from South Carolina, which happened to be my school, the Citadel, and Furman University, and we played in the Charlotte Coliseum. And my senior year was Michael Jordan's freshman year. So that year, 1982, boy, am I really dating myself now. 1982, I got to play against Michael Jordan, and North Carolina would go on and win the national championship that year. And then the following night, I got to play against Jim Valvano, Jimmy V, and North Carolina State, who the following year would go on to win the national championship. So unbeknownst to me, in the course of one weekend, I got to play against 2 national championship teams. So the funny story is, fast forward, 18, 19 years later, my youngest brother, the one I mentioned who pitched for Notre Dame, was the basketball coach at Loyola Academy in Chicago.
Okay.
And he's coaching Michael Jordan's 2 sons. And he said, one day I'm at practice, and it's toward the end of practice, and I'm teaching the players a drill. And I look up, and nobody's paying attention to me. Nobody's looking at me at all. And so I look where they look, and it was over at the door, and Michael Jordan had come into the gym as a dad to pick up his kids and take them home after school or after practice. And my brother looked at him and said, hey, Michael, you're a little bit of a distraction. Would you mind waiting out in the hall until practice is over? And Jordan and his wife were incredibly gracious people. They were very nice. And he said, yeah, I'm really sorry, coach. I didn't mean to interrupt practice. I'll wait out in the hall until practice is over. And my brother thought later, gee, I'm probably the only coach in the history of basketball that ever kicked Michael Jordan out of practice.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, that's a moment, life moment right there. So I know you said that you played against Michael Jordan his rookie year. So did you guard him, or his freshman year, not rookie year, but his freshman year of college? Was you one of the players on your team to guard him?
I wasn't. And, as great as Michael Jordan became, when Jordan was a freshman, the player that everybody worried about was James Worthy, who was North Carolina's big star. And, Jordan hadn't really established himself yet, as the player that he ended up being and things like that. So James Worthy was the player. I guarded Worthy. He totally took me to I won't even tell you how bad he took me to the woodshed. He did they were just a great team. And, Dean Smith, their coach. And again, I'm really going to date myself. This was before the 3-point shot, the 3-point line was put in, and it was before there was a shot clock. in college basketball.
Oh,
So
wow.
North Carolina was famous for what they call their four corners offense. They would get a lead on you, and then they would spread everything out and just sort of pass the ball and run the clock out. And they were good at it. And Dean Smith, their coach, was known for it. But yeah, James Worthy was really their big player at that time.
Oh, okay, sweet. Oh, so you played against the man, one of the best, the GOAT. You know, a lot of.
Well, I think he is. I
Yeah.
absolutely do. I mean, I know everybody compares him to LeBron, and I just think Jordan. You can't compare apples. It's not an apples to apples comparison. It's different times. The game was played differently than it is now, and that. But I mean, LeBron and Michael Jordan are obviously two of the greatest players that have ever played the game.
Yeah, you can't compare the two.
No.
But I take Mike over LeBron. Like
I will too, but
like here's there. Like I would take him over LeBron. And I think like 95% of fans probably would agree too. That because especially with me, I was raised on the Michael Jordan era, and then also I'm like right there in the LeBron era. But before LeBron, it was like Kobe and Iverson. So it was like you forgetting like that great area that it's a lot of things that Kobe did when he was in the league and when he first came in the league. So
yeah, I mean Kobe was
yeah.
amazing. And I mean his work ethic and how he was a student of the game, student of basketball. I remember hearing a story when Coach K, Mike Krzyzewski, was coaching the Olympic team, and they were getting ready to leave. The team was getting ready to leave to go, I believe it was China, to play in the Olympics. And the night before, they had played a game, and Kobe had totally been selfish. He was just shooting shots he shouldn't have shot. He wasn't distributing the ball properly. And LeBron came to Coach K and said, you got to talk to him. It's like, we can't have that when we're playing in China. He said, I'll talk to him before we leave tomorrow. And so right before they get on the plane, he pulls Kobe aside and he said, I need to talk to you. Kobe comes in. He's like, Kobe, you can't play like you played last night. This is not good for the team. It's not good for you. And we need to make sure that you don't do that again. Kobe looked at Coach K and said, is that it? Coach K said, yep, that's it. And Kobe looked at Coach K and said, you're absolutely right. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have played that way. I was playing selfish. It will never happen again. That's a professional. It's not personal. I'm not going to pout. I'm not going to, call you names. I'm not going to make it your fault. I'm going to take ownership for what I did wrong. I'm going to tell you it's never going to happen again. And then we're going to put it behind us and we're going to move on. And I thought that was incredibly classy of the way Kobe handled that.
Yeah, most definitely. Like also just speaking different languages. Like, he to relate to so many, not just, here.
Right.
Even like you just see the IQ when he's on the court, opposed to majority of the other ones. So, and then you start hearing, everyone experience about, playing with Kobe or playing against him. And it's like, even the opposing team was like, yo, he's all about business. So
yeah,
it wasn't no play when he came,
right.
He was strictly like, hey, I'm here to like, I think he was in an interview and he was like, I'm here to like, it was one interview. He was like, man, I want to be around all these athletes because I'm trying to kill them. I ain't trying to be friends with them. Like that mentality, like, yo, I'm not trying to be friends with the opponent, but before the game, but we'd be friends after the game.
Yeah, it's a competition. We're competing.
So he's really competitive. Like that was one of my all-time players. Like I have PlayStation covers like with Kobe on it. Like it was crazy. Like it hurt like just to him, and then the way it happened. Like it was tough.
Yeah.
Everyone was calling, checking up on me. I was at work. They was like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" They was like, At first, I thought it was like a hoax. Like I'm like, all right, whatever. I'm blowing it off, and then, the supervisor comes like, yeah, this happened. Don't freak out. But I'm like, I already know. Right then and there, I knew like, oh yeah, it's some truth to it. But it's one of those like you thought you knew him.
Yeah, I mean, you wanted to be like him. You know,
Yeah,
there was a Gatorade commercial when Jordan was playing. You know, they had a
yeah,
song. You know, to be like Mike. I want to be like Mike.
yeah,
And you admired Kobe, you admired Jordan, you admire LeBron for their work ethic, for what they
yeah,
do. For it's their craft, and they want to be better at it. They want to get better every single day. And I think we all admire that, regardless of what our craft is. It's a great example that they set for everybody.
yeah, most definitely. So, like, if you had a chance to go back, right, to play in D1, would you pick like I know when I was growing up, like Kentucky was one, the Blue Devils, well Duke. The, would you pick another university to play?
I don't think so. I was very fortunate. I had Coach K before he was Coach K. When he was the basketball coach at Army.
Okay.
He came to my house and recruited me to play for him. I just didn't think my knee would hold up under the scrutiny of having to go into the military afterwards. I did kind of a funny story. The year before I graduated, or the year I graduated, Kentucky had won the national championship, and their coach was Joe B. Hall. And I remember I played in a conference in Chicago with Isaiah Thomas, who would go on to play in Indiana and then play for the Detroit Pistons and win some NBA championships. And we had played at St. Joseph. That's where Isaiah played the night before. So it was Saturday morning, and I was sleeping in. And my mom comes in, and she's like, "Get up. You have a phone call." And I'm like, "Mom, leave me alone. Just tell him I'll call him back." You know, and she's like, "No, get up, get up." And I wouldn't get up. And then my dad came in, and my dad was, as I mentioned, he was like 6'5", 250 pounds. You didn't say no to my father. And my dad was like, get up, get up. There's a phone call for you. And it happened to be Joe B. Hall, the basketball coach at Kentucky, who called, you know, as kind of a recruiting. I was not good enough to play at Kentucky, but it was just kind of cool. You know, I was kind of like, oh, I'm going to sleep in. Here's the national championship coach
Yeah,
calling me, and I'm going to sleep in. It's like, what an idiot I was. You know, it's like,
yeah,
no, I wish you would have told me it was him. I would have gotten up. I mean, it was
yeah,
just, and that's so, yeah, no, I wouldn't have played for anybody but the Citadel. Les Robinson, my coach, coach at the Citadel, coach at East Tennessee State. And actually, when Jim Valvano got in trouble at North Carolina State at the end of his career, my coach, Les Robinson, took his place and coached at North Carolina State. And I believe he's the only coach, or the only person, who coached 3 NCAA Division I basketball teams and was also the athletic director at 3 NCAA Division I colleges. So he had a pretty interesting career himself.
oh yeah, most definitely. I was gonna ask you like, how was that conversation on the phone? Like, did
With,
you?
with Coach K,
Yeah, could you recall it or some of it?
he was just a classy guy. I mean, he was an amazing individual. You wanted to play for him. He just exuded confidence. He exuded, leadership. And I'll tell you a funny story. So fast forward, I'm a police officer. Our daughter's like 3 years old, and Duke played Connecticut for the national championship. I happened to be working that night, so I recorded it, and I watched it the next night with our daughter, who was 3 years old. And Connecticut beat Duke. And at the end of the game, Krzyzewski's having a hug with William Avery, one of his players. And my daughter was watching the game with me. And then the next night at dinner, she's like, "Dad, can we go downstairs and watch the hug?" I'm like, "The hug? What are you talking about?" She remembered the hug between Coach K and William Avery. And literally, for the next like 2 weeks, every night after dinner, "Dad, can we go watch the hug? Dad, can we go watch the hug?" So I'm like, okay. I sat down and I wrote Krzyzewski a letter. I'm like, "You don't remember me. You recruited me, 20 years ago, but I want to tell you the story about my daughter." And I sent it to him. And 2 weeks later, I get a handwritten letter from him basically saying, "Thanks for sharing that. It was a tough loss for us. I get really close to my players. William Avery's a special individual." And I thought that was classy. You didn't have to
Yeah,
send me that letter.
no,
I didn't go play for you. I had
yeah,
said no to you, but you had enough class that you would take the time to write me a letter and send it back. It was I still have that letter.
I was gonna ask that. I was just gonna ask that.
Yeah.
Like, you should frame it. Like,
I should. I should. I have it with all the letters I had from him that he sent me when he was in Army, and that.
yeah,
So yeah.
I frame that. Hey, and give it to your daughter. Like, that's
Yeah.
something that she did.
Oh,
Like,
she'll inherit it. Don't worry.
like, oh man, like it all started from you. You wanted to watch the hug, so
Yeah,
hey, here you go.
it really did.
Far as that, I know Coach K put me in the mind like a Phil Jackson air Spoelstra. Like, he's laid back to the point that when he started yelling, the players know, like, okay, when you see air Spoelstra, he started yelling, you like, oh yeah, it's serious. Because he's
Yeah.
like the most down, laid back coach. Like, it's take a lot when he gets to yelling, it's serious, So that's how I look at Coach K, because when you see him, he's like, you see Phil Jackson sitting up there, that's Coach K. But when you see him get up and he's walking the floor, the court, oh yeah, it's serious. He means business. And we
Absolutely.
looking like we did not work, we didn't work this hard to be down like this. Like, we
Yeah.
should be somewhere close or not close, up
Right.
on the scoreboard. So I've been watching him for a long time. I got introduced him when I was in, I want to say like 5th, 6th grade.
Okay.
My cousin Eric, his favorite college team was Duke. That's all. At that time they had JJ Redick, Carlos Bruiser,
Yep.
Jay Williams. I could like March Madness. Oh, bro, you cannot turn the TV. You better not touch the TV. Every game Duke played, he was glued to it.
Yep.
So it picked up from from me being around him to like it just trickled down on me. Like, that was like one of the teams that I was into as far as college, and like everybody is like they was like Tom Brady of college, like the Patriot, like the Chicago Bulls. Like, everyone, if you beat them, like it was like okay, like we just won the championship, but it's like hold on, it's just one game. But it was like that opposed to how it is now. Like, now you got Kentucky, you got Ohio State, you got other universities that now you're looking into, like, we have to beat those guys now. We got to get past them. We got to get past this team, opposed to everyone just looking at the Blue Devils and you like, so that's a lot of pressure on them as well. Just coming and playing, like, it's almost like they defeated before they even got there, because they worry about, like, if I'm to mess up. And that's how my son is. Like, when I'm at his games and everything, he sit back and look like, okay, I got to show out because my dad here. I got to play really good. But I'll be telling him, like, hey, just play your game. At first, when he was younger, like, I know he did like blow past certain defenders. So I'm like, dude, you way faster than him. Why wait till he get set on defense, blow past him, and then if you get to the bucket, that's a quick, easy two. Worst case scenario is best case scenario is an N1. So now you got the free throw line, you make the free, it's free money. Like, you can't lose. So now he's getting like a little bit more aggressive, like, but when he played with his AU team, he's kind of like timid, or not. I wouldn't say that. He feel like I don't have to do as much, because it's more like I got other players on the team that capable of scoring, making their own shots, opposed to me getting them open, and then I'm feeding them the balls so they could get a shot. So it's more of that. It comes with growth and maturity. Just reading the floor and the defense, and just playing more. Like they say, 10,000 hours to master. So hopefully he hit his 10,000 hours before high school. he mastered. Yeah, so that's the big one.
It is, and that's, and I think you're doing the right thing. I coached high school basketball, and sometimes the parents can be the worst group.
Yeah.
That they think their kid's going to go play in college. I mean, statistically, they're not going to go play in college.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the numbers, if you look at the statistic, and each level that you go up, every player is good when you're in college. I mean, even the people that are on the bench, they were probably one of the best players on their high school team. And so if you understand that, and then if you're lucky enough to make it to the NBA, everybody's everybody's making $1 million. Everybody's
Yeah.
is good. Everybody can probably take any player in college. So you want your kid to love the game. You want
Yeah.
your kid to appreciate the game. And I think so many parents ruin that for their kids. They force their kids into things. We're going to move across the country and you're going to play for this team. Or,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter about the high school team. You're going to play for this AAU team and things like that. And they end up playing because you want them to play. You as
Yeah.
the parent want them to play, not because they love the game. And
Yeah.
I think you're doing it right. You're not taking away the love of the game for your kid. It's like, just go out there and have fun. Do what you can. If you're good enough, you'll get discovered. Some coach will hear you and stuff like that. There's a great book that I read recently. It's called Do Hard Things, and it's written by a guy by the name of Steve Magnus. And Steve Magnus was the track and field coach at the University of Minnesota, so in the Big Ten. And he just talks about parents and how parents should just don't be the coach. Don't try to be the coach if you're not the coach. I mean, I was the coach with my own daughter, but don't be the coach. Be there to support your kid. Be there to love them, but don't make this about you. Don't try to live vicariously through your kid. Let your kid enjoy the experience of playing whatever sport it is: football, baseball, basketball, soccer, tennis, golf, whatever it ends up being. Let your kid enjoy the sport. Don't take that away from your child.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, because they'll start hating to play, opposed to, like you said, loving the game. I know we're about to switch topics. You know, the fast food industry. I know you work, with the corporation Wendy's. How was it working there opposed to, how it is now? I know obviously when you was working there, it's sort of different, sort of, but was there like more competition, like with the Mickey D's, the Burger Kings, the White Castle? I forgot Checkers. They brought that back to Chicago.
Oh,
Um,
did they? Okay.
yeah, so we have a few of those back, and some they still closed down because I guess they wasn't doing as well as they expected. But yeah, but Checkers, I think we got like one or two now, if I'm not mistaken.
Interesting. Okay.
So, like, was there a big like competition in between? Even though they might not say, "Oh no, we're not in competition with Burger King," but deep down inside, you like, you work in the industry itself, like not to give inside beans or spill it, but like, is there sort of some type of competition between the fast food industry? Like, if Burger King got to sell, we need to sell, things in that nature.
Yes, we were in competition. I mean, there was no ifs, ands, buts about it. So I was started out in field marketing and eventually moved to new product marketing. So looking at putting new products into our stores. And we subscribed to this thing called CREST. And CREST was an acronym for Consumer Report on Eating Share Trends. This data, we had data on who ate what, when, where, why, how, with whom, at what time, everything. I mean, you could look up and say, okay, when were the most hot dogs consumed? We didn't sell hot dogs. We looked at selling hot dogs, but you could look up the data. Did more men than women consume hot dogs? What age group consumed the most hot dogs? At what time of the day were those hot dogs consumed? What was on those hot dogs? Mustard, ketchup, relish. What was it? Something else? I mean, we had data on every food, every day part. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and so I was involved in a lot of things. I was involved in Wendy's. Now, you're pretty young. You may not remember this. There was a retired beauty operator, hairdresser from Chicago by the name of Clara Peller, who had one of the most iconic commercials, and it was a Wendy's commercial. It was called "Where's the Beef?" I don't know if you've ever seen that, but politicians picked up on it. It was part of the presidential campaign.
Yeah.
And she was about 4'10", and
Right.
she would, it was Wendy's has a bigger hamburger. Wendy's has a bigger patty, and the whole tagline was, "Where's the beef? Where's the beef for the McDonald hamburger? Where's the beef for the Burger King hamburger? And so,
Oh,
so it was that kind of thing. So yeah, you were constantly taking shots at the competition, that you had better hamburgers, or you had better quality food, or it was better to eat at Wendy's than it was to eat at McDonald's and things
yeah,
like that. So yeah, we were definitely in competition with each other.
yeah, most definitely. And I know, jumping back to, you've been on the SWAT as a negotiator. Did that lead to you starting your own, security firm?
It did. I had a master's degree in criminal justice. I had all this training, from SWAT, and it was at a time really before. I mean, there were school shootings, but not nearly the way they are today.
Yeah,
And so I worked with mostly private, independent schools. So a lot of the public schools have their own police departments and their own way they do things. These were smaller, independent schools around the United States. So I would travel and I would do an assessment of their campus. A lot of times I would write their policies and procedures, and I would also train their staff on different events that might happen if there was a shooter in the building, or if there was a fire. It was because I always used to tell them, and it was kind of a funny statistic that we are mandated, or schools are mandated, to have X number of fire drills every year. So say they're supposed to have 3 fire drills, and that's a law. That's a state law, whatever state you're in. There hasn't been a fire in a school in 70 years. Nobody's died in a fire. There hasn't been I mean, sure, there's little fires here and there, trash can fires or stuff, but there hasn't been any kind of big fire. But we're practicing for those big fires. And yet kids are getting killed every day in schools,
yeah.
but there's no requirement to have lockdown drills and things like that. That has changed a little bit now, but when I did it, yeah, you had to have so many fire drills, but you didn't have to have any lockdown drills for an active
Yeah.
shooter or something like that. So yeah, it was a niche. It was an opportunity for me to use my training, my education, and my experience to try to help schools be a little bit safer.
Okay. Did you only do as far as schools only? Did you do any like other corporations or other small business?
I dabbled a little bit with churches, because churches were another place that we're seeing, gunmen come in and do things like that. So mostly the churches I did were connected to the school. It was a religious school, and they were
Okay.
connected to a church. So I would do both, just because I was there. It was physical proximity that I could do both and things like that. But it was pretty much just churches and schools.
Oh, okay. How big was your team when you did, the schools and the church?
Just me.
Oh, yes, you.
Yeah, it was just me. I was a single person LLC, and most of my business was word of mouth. I would do a job for somebody, and then they would go to a conference and be talking to the business managers of their conference, or the principals at their conference, and it's like, hey, Terry Tucker did this for us. It sounds like you need that. And so I get a call from a school, and I get a call from a school in San Diego, or New Orleans, or Virginia, or something like that, or Houston, and then I would go and do that for that particular school. So I really didn't advertise too much. It was mostly word of mouth that allowed me to have that business.
Oh, okay, sweet. That's yeah, word of mouth. And like I started up a little lawn company, right, a few
Mhm.
years back, and I got most of my accounts just off word of mouth. Like,
Yeah.
oh, he does a nice job, reasonable price. Hey, try him out. So I have to understand word of mouth is still like the number one, self advertisement that you really don't even have to pay.
It's
That's
great, isn't
yeah.
it?
It's like just go do what just do what you paid to do, or and you put your all into it. If you're not, it's pretty much the word of mouth. Like I'd rather have 10 people saying, "Oh yeah, he's awesome," opposed to someone that one person. They only take one bed, and then it's like, oh, they forgot all about the other, the 10, but the 11, contract, or 11 person is pretty much you going out the window. Like
Yeah.
everything that you start building in, and you just going north, and you start the rise for the good is like that one bad review would just plummet your whole brand or operation. So I understand that. I know as far as that, the security. After that, what did you go into after you did the security firm?
I I was sort of coaching. Excuse me. I was sort of coaching girls' high school basketball, and it was nice being your own boss because I had this school security consulting business, and I could kind of wind it down a little bit during basketball season so that I could coach the girls, and then I could ramp it back up in the off season, in the summers and things like that,
Mhm.
and do the business. And so I was really coaching girls' high school basketball when I found out that I had cancer. That was back in 2012. I ended up having a rare form of cancer. I had actually a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot, right below my third toe. And initially, I didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I made an appointment and I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or
Yeah.
unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology and had it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I received the call that we all dread. And as I said, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have this incredibly rare form of melanoma. And most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun and it affects
Yeah.
the melon, the pigment in our skin. This has nothing to do with sun exposure. This is a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet and the palms of the hands. And so he tells me now I have this rare form of melanoma. And that's pretty much been my life for the last 11 and a half years now.
All right. So, like, is there like like a certain percentage of like individuals that form that sort of cancer?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know the exact numbers, but if you think, millions of people get
Yeah.
cancer every year, maybe a couple thousand people get my form. It's an
Mhm.
incredibly small number of people that get it. And so when I was diagnosed, I was told this is a death sentence. You'll more than likely be dead in a couple of years. If you get a miracle, you might live 5 years. And I thought, well, okay, you know what? There's nothing I can do about it. There were no drugs, there was no therapy. The only thing they could offer me was surgery. If it was somewhere that they could cut it out, they said that's what we'll do. But otherwise, we don't have anything to offer you. And so I thought, well, maybe I can turn a death sentence into a life sentence, into living a better life. And so initially, because there was nothing my doctor could do, she put me on this drug called interferon. And the side effects of the interferon, and really all this was, we're kicking the can down the road. That's all we're trying to do. We're kicking the can down the road and trying to buy you some time for more therapies to come available. And so I took this interferon injection every week. And the side effects of the interferon were that it gave me severe flu like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu, and I'm not talking about I just don't feel good. I'm talking about I'm throwing up, I have diarrhea, I ache, I have a fever, I have the chills. It was just a bad case of the flu for 2 to 3 days every week for 5 years. And as I said, that wasn't a cure. That was, we're just trying to buy you some more time. Eventually, the interferon became so toxic to my body that I ended up in the intensive care unit with a body temperature of 108 degrees, which is usually not compatible with being alive. Somehow I survived that. I was at a level 1 trauma center in their ER and they were able to stabilize me. So I had to stop the interferon. And almost immediately after stopping it, the cancer came back in the exact same spot on my foot where it had presented 5 years earlier. That necessitated the amputation of my left foot in 2018. Cancer worked its way up my leg into my shin in 2019, requiring 2 more surgeries. And then in 2020, right in the middle of the COVID pandemic, I had a tumor in my ankle that grew large enough that it fractured my tibia, basically broke my leg. And during the COVID pandemic, I found out I was going to have my leg amputated above the knee. And I also found out I had tumors in my lungs, which even today, 3 years later, I'm still being treated for those tumors in my lungs. So that's kind of been my 11 and a half year battle with cancer.
Yeah, yeah, that's a lot. Like transition from one to the other, and then you know, just the post living is what I was going to ask. Like, how's the post living after all your surgery and treatment? How that changed prior to you was able to get up, you were able to go and walk.
Yeah, it was a whole different lifestyle. I mean, I haven't worked in 11 and a half years because of being on these drugs and all the, I was on interferon. I took a shot every week. I couldn't work. I mean, for at least 3 out of 7 days, I was laid up, totally laid up, couldn't do anything. And then, you kind of start to feel better, and then you take the drug again. And then it's just a cycle. And I'll tell you there, I felt there was a point where, there's sort of living and then there's not dying. And I really kind of felt I was in that not dying phase. I really wasn't living. I didn't feel I was contributing anything to my family. I couldn't work. I was just sick all the time. And I got to a point where I was just so sick of being sick that I prayed to die. I mean, I never contemplated suicide or anything like that, but I literally did pray to die. It's like, look, God, I'm not doing anything here. I'm not contributing. All I'm doing is taking from all these people that are helping me. Maybe it's time to go. Maybe it's time to get out of here. But obviously God didn't do that. He kept me here. And one of the things I learned, I mentioned my father was dying of cancer when I graduated from college. And my dad back in the 1980s had end-stage breast cancer. And in a man, they didn't really know how to treat breast cancer. So they told him to go home and die. And he lived another 3.5 years. And I believe he did because he had a purpose. He was in real estate and he worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And I sort of tucked that in the back of my mind and said, when it's my time, I mean, we're all going to die. When it's my time, I need to have a purpose. I need to be able to do something with my life, even though it may not be something I get paid for or anything like that. I've got to have a purpose. And so for the last 11 and a half years, I started a speaking business. I started a speaking business right as COVID hit. And then, and it was like, okay, so nobody's doing it. Nobody's hiring speakers either in person or virtually. So like so many other companies, I had to figure out a different way to deliver my service. And I had to figure out a different way to do it, a different audience to do it from, and a different format. And somebody reached out to me and said, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? And I said, sure. What's a podcast? I had no idea what a podcast was. And they're like, well, we kind of have a discussion and then we put it on social media. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure. I'll be happy to do that. Because I was so horrible. I was terrible. I had Post-it notes all around the camera, and the host would ask me a question and I'd lean in and I'd read a Post-it. I was terrible. But I'll tell you a quick story. About 6 months ago, I was a guest on a podcast the host was a former NFL player. He was a guy who he was like 6'6", like 310 pounds. He played for the Titans. He played for the Steelers. And I remember we were talking after, and even his brother is in the Professional Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. And we were talking after the podcast, and he said, Terry, when I started my podcast, I didn't think anybody would listen to me. I didn't think anybody would resonate with my message. And I said, Marcus, how could you feel that way? I mean, you made it to the pinnacle, to the top of professional sports. I mean, you have so much to offer people. He said, yeah, I just didn't think anybody would pay attention to me. So, I mean, I don't care how important, influential, successful you are in life. we all feel from time to time that we're just not good enough or that nobody's going to listen to us. But we all have a story, and our story is important to tell.
Yeah, most definitely. That's the thing with podcasts. Everyone, different platforms use their platform for different things. Some, use the opportunity to tell their story. Some use it, to do other things. So,
Right.
so each podcast platform is still in the same industry. It's almost like Hollywood. You got your action, you got your drama, you got your suspense, right?
Right.
So each platform, well, each podcast has its own unique, sound, own unique voice. So when you reached out, I was like, oh, this is what I use mine for. It's funny that you said you started your speaking company up in the pandemic. That's when I started my podcast.
Yeah.
I hit the little Zoom. I still have it, the little Zoom. It was just like two outputs for two mics. And I started in my kitchen. My wife was looking at me like, what? So then I transitioned to the front room to in the corner, and now I'm here. So it's just trusting the process
Yeah.
and just keep going and being consistent. And that's why I'm getting a lot. Like everyone said, just keep it going.
Yep.
They not listening today, they not listening tomorrow. Like you said, someone like, hey, podcast, and you like, I did that years ago. So it happens, especially with like social media. Everything is on the internet now, so it's not like you really have to search.
Right.
Um, I come across things, on my YouTube channel. I'm like, I'm not even subscribed to this channel. How is this getting like? I even searched anything, nothing dealing with that content, but it's showing up. So I don't know how they do it, but and then it catch your attention. So it's like, oh, this is interesting. Let me click on it and let me subscribe. So it's more of that things in that nature. So it's everything is like, I guess it's a time for everything in your life.
Yes.
It's that's destined. Ain't nothing you could do to, change it, or it's either you stay down when they hit you, or you get up and you fight. So it's more
Yeah.
of that.
What's that saying Mike Tyson has that, everybody has a plan until they get hit in the mouth?
Yeah.
I love that saying,
Yeah. So yeah, just being a survivor and still the jack of all trades. Like you still got plenty more to go. Um, and I wish you the best, of a recovery, and hope you get over that hill. But as my listeners listening to this and tuning in, you know, everyone has a story, and yours is really needs to be heard. And thought about writing a book.
I have written a book.
Oh, sweet.
I wrote a book. Really, I'll give you a quick story about how. So the book is called Sustainable Excellence: The 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And it was really a book born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player I had coached in high school who had moved to the area in Colorado with her fiance, where my wife and I live. And the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner, I'm really excited that you're living close and I can watch you find and live your purpose. And she got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and then living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man reach out to me on social media, and he asked me what I thought were the most important things that he should learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And Cuzo, I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others. Not that those aren't important. Those are incredibly important. Yeah. But I wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I spent some time and I was taking some notes, and I kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally during the 3 to 4 month period where I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how the book came to be.
Oh, sweet. So where can they find the book?
Pretty much anywhere you can get a book online, Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, Apple iBooks. You can go to my website, motivationalcheck.com, and get the link there. But anywhere you can get a book online, you can get Sustainable Excellence.
Oh, sweet. I'm going to check that out.
Thank you.
Also, if the listeners trying to find you, do you have like a social media page, or I know your website?
Yeah, the easiest way, I have a LinkedIn account, a Facebook, an Instagram, a Twitter, or X now, whatever it's called. I have all of those. The easiest way is just to go to motivationalcheck.com, my blog, and all my social media links are there, and you can click on them from there.
Okay, sweet. And like I say, I like to thank you for coming on the show. Most definitely, we have to do it again. Maybe top of the year, certain things, touch bases, and yeah.
I would love that. And I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to come on and talk with you today. It's been a lot of fun for me, and hopefully our conversation will have a positive impact on your audience.
Cuzo!